Thank you very much for coming again after the lunch break for this final exciting session. It's called Cultures for Peace and Prosperity. I'm not sure whether Christoph wanted us to end with a hopeful outlook. We will see how it goes because we have a great lineup of critical thinkers here, so we will see how optimistic we can end this conference before the summing up, of course. But I'm very much looking forward to this session and to the speakers we have today. I would like to welcome Sarah Spiekermann-Hoff at first. She's head of the Institute for Information Systems and Society at the Vienna University of Economics and Business, and she's also co-founder of the Sustainability Computing Lab. And today she will speak about value perception, ethics, and technology implications. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. In the last session, Professor Fraunberger from Salzburg said we actually need a new conceptualization of the human-technology relationship. And I found this a very good starter for my own presentation. And when we walk these days through the woods, perhaps some of you do that. What do you perceive? We perceive values. We might perceive freshness, livelihood, cyclicality, and animals might perceive something different, like nutrition value, or in former times when we were still having waters from the rivers, we might have perceived the nutrition value of those waters as well. Now, these high values that we all perceive as species, they are defined till today. In the past 500 years, I think this developed in a quite anthropocentric way, in a quite dualistic way. If you go to a standard dictionary or you look at contemporary ethical computing literature, value-sensitive design literature, values are typically defined as follows, that values are principles or standards of a person or a society, the personal or societal judgment of what is valuable and important in life. This is what you will find cited thousands of times without ever being questioned of whether that's actually a proper definition of values. When you look at the roots of the word perception, you find an interesting aspect here, which is that it comes from the Latin word capere, which is actually to grasp. So there is a pulling here. And this is the kind of value understanding that I have been adopting and developing over the past 7 years, building on material value ethics from Max Scheler, developed in the 1920s and then further developed over the past 100 years, but overlooked by for some reason in most of the literature. So I define values as phenomena that disclose the degree of desirability of something or someone, and that give meaning to us and motivate our selection from available means, modes, and ends of action. So in the center of this is that values are not my personal preferences and ideas that I find important, or perhaps some other people in my peer group as well, but that when you go out to the woods and you breathe, that freshness is not in your fantastic brain, but it is in the world. The freshness is there. The cyclicality is there. It is a phenomenon, as Heidegger would say, in the world, and we as human beings, we grasp it, we take it, we interact with it. It's very close, my thinking, to James Gibson's perception of affordances. The affordances of the environment are what it offers the animal, what it provides or furnishes either for good or for ill. And on this basis and on this background, I would like to talk about two things now. How does a living species like a human perceive values? Please consider this as an attempt. And then the second part, which is the valuation breakdown thesis in the face of our current technological developments. So how does a living species like a human perceive values? At this point, I should probably acknowledge that I'm neither a philosopher nor a psychologist nor a biologist. I'm just an information systems scholar, and I have developed this definition in the face of technology. Because I was entrusted in the past 7 years to develop the world's first global standard on value-based ethical system design, I had a great responsibility, which was that if I'm asked to develop an ISO standard on value-based technology, my first question must be, what are values then anyways? And it was because of that great responsibility to build a great technological standard of system design, system development life cycle, that I was forced to understand this phenomenon at a deeper level than the standard Cambridge dictionary that so many people just turn to when they cite the value definition. So value-based engineering, can we do that? And that was the outset of my work on this theme. Now, what we found empirically, doing so many case studies on value-based engineering, that, we study technology, we are looking into how people interact with machines, and we always seem to deal with the value phenomenon on 3 distinct ontological layers. Let me give you an example of that. We have now biometric toys in our children's rooms. A teddy bear, for instance, that's able to see and speak with the children. Imagine yourself, you're coming into such a children's room, you see the biometric toy, and it's able to speak. You are looking at it, and you are laughing. The high core value of well-being is somehow actualizing through the positive value quality of human likeness. Because why do you have this emotion? Why do you actualize this value? Because it's talking, the teddy. And how can it do that? Due to value dispositions. That means speech recognition and certain sensor technologies being embedded as physical properties in the thing. You might note that I don't say that the technology embodies values, but I'm just saying a thing has value dispositions, and these value dispositions actualize a value quality, or carries a value quality that actualizes a higher value. Now, this sophisticated value language, we developed it in the IEEE 7000 standardization process on the background of hundreds of stakeholder conversations about technology. I'll give you another example on negative value qualities. Now, core values obviously are always positive principles. Take security, for instance. It's a positive core value. Ideal ideas in the world, in the Platonian sense, that's also behind here, are always positive. They unite us. Love, knowledge, security, safety, community, conviviality. You can go to Japan, Indonesia, South America, you will find those ideal values. But how they actualize, that's different across cultures. And in technology design, for instance, when it comes to negative value qualities, we see that security might be undermined by a lack of confidentiality. And that lack of confidentiality is a result of a value bearer, like a biometric toy, that has poor encryption. Poor encryption is what engineers can work on. And in the standard, we actually showed how we can, through stakeholder conversations, see what value qualities are important to actualize the high values that we seek, that we want. and then tell the engineers how to build the system requirements, so the system dispositions. And one of the clear hypotheses is that we cannot build good technology, value-based technology, if we don't use the sophisticated, distinguished vocabulary that we then also put into the standard. Now, a challenge is that when you do these projects, you'll see that every single technology relationship, every single system of interest, as we call it, actualizes between 50 and 100 potential values. So we are dealing with an incredible complexity when we attempt to build technology. I could have a whole talk now on that complexity and how we resolved it practically in what we call value-based engineering. But I don't do that. I want to continue with the philosophical part, because the language that I have presented to you is actually, as I already said a moment ago, based on Max Scheler's value ethics, a long forgotten piece of work that is so essential for anyone who wants to work on values and perception that I really recommend it, but it is really difficult to read and thick. So he already said the value qualities are authentic qualities of the value itself, or he gave this terminology actually to us. And so it was an interesting endeavor actually to work with 35 engineers from our work group around the world who never studied philosophy and to confront them with this work, but it worked out. Anyways, Scheler himself, obviously at the time, did not think about technology. He was rather going to the woods. And so when you think about it, you walk through these woods, and then the water temperature is actually what is driving the freshness that we all perceive through our senses, and that freshness is actualizing our well-being. Another example, the Brunel of the wood carries and actualizes bark intactness, and that bark intactness actualizes this high value of tree health. So you see actually that this ontology developed in the past that we apply to technology is you can think of reality perception on those three distinct ontological layers. It works. But when two human beings walk through the woods, they might have a very different perception of the bark's intactness and the freshness. Because different human beings really see these values very differently, depending on where they're coming from, depending on what they're able to see. Because imagine yourself, you are walking with a forester through the woods, through that same wood. And when you walk with a forester or a biologist, he will look at the bark of this, lying tree there in a completely different way than you as a layman. You as a layman will say, oh yeah, okay, you see this falling tree there, but it seems healthy to you, you're fine. The forester, the biologist, he might look at the bark and say, do you actually see that here it is not intact and it is for ecological reasons that it has fallen? So you see, one person is happy, the other is alarmed. And this is due because there seem to be varying preconceptions about the value qualities. Phenomenologically, contents of sensations, those immediately given as contents of a sensation, are only those which in their coming and going imply some variation of our experienced lived body values states. This is a Scheler's citation. What he says there is that values are, interesting, contents of sensation. We've heard here talks about sensation, but we haven't talked about the content of sensation. And values are that content. And he argues that really when you perceive, you are only able to perceive the content, also this, for example, health of the tree, or absent health of the tree, your body reacts, your livid body reacts, the livid body conception. And this seems to be also true for technology, because we realize that when two people look at, for example, the encryption of a bank's database, we see that there is somebody who is just a Microsoft security certificate a month ago, and he'll have a very different perception of the security and encryption force and rigor than a guy who has spent the last 20 years in the Chaos Computer Club. The people from the hacker scene will look at the security and they immediately react to that because they have an embodied perception of the value versus the layman who is just theoretically, but not with his livid body, actually able to perceive that value. And this is an important argument for me here, because I'm building on Thomas Fuchs' conception of the brain, published in his book, The Ecology of the Brain, where he goes back to current psychologists like Lakoff and argues that human beings actually interact in their consciousness with the environment in a relationship through something called Vorgestalt, pre-schema. So we seem to be, and this is a hypothesis of my work, we seem to have pre-schemas of values. A pre-schema in normal, cognitive science education would say we have a conception of above and below. We learn as children above and below, as an example of a pre-schema. And my hypothesis is, and actually Fuchs himself has written a small article on that, it may be that values are also Vorgestalten, and that a forester has learned a Vorgestalt of what the health of a tree and a bark means, whilst we as a layperson have not had the opportunity to develop that Vorgestalt, and therefore we have no physical bodily reaction towards that health. Yeah? It's neutral for us. So humans share by nature the potential to see, but whether that potential is actualized depends on their unique autobiographic memory, the implicit memory of their livid body, as well as the physical capabilities of their body. So that is really important. The way we have lived, what we have learned, what we have experienced, has created in us Vorgestalten that are part of our conscious relationship with the world, either giving meaning or not giving meaning to us, allowing us to value or not to value. Value perception, the ability to value, is and contributes to the singularitas of a person and her uniqueness. And now I want to come to the second part of my talk, which may take 7 minutes and not 5. And this is, I am deeply convinced that our constant exposure to technologies will lead to something I call the valuation breakdown thesis. That's my next 7 years. And the valuation breakdown thesis is something that where I build on Merleau-Ponty's studies of technology. Merleau-Ponty has discussed how blind people embody technology, a blind person feeling the street through the stick's top. So the blind person embodies in his or her livid body the technology. The cognition extends, it is embodied, but is also extended. It extends to the outer world. And we now use technologies in so many ways where we extend our consciousness through technology. So, for example, our bodily intuition, to contemplate on whether our child will be a male or female, is changed through technology. I see it on the screen. I don't need to listen to my womb anymore. The decision to do an abortion or not is deeply influenced by these pictures, because if I see these pictures, the probability that I do an abortion is significantly decreased. Have you ever been to the supermarket recently and recognized that a lot of the girls who might be looking super on TikTok go to the supermarket cash out without any makeup? It's almost like a trend. Because what is your real identity? People perceive that identity to be what they are displaying on the internet. So again, we have a real world that is not engaged. I don't even put my makeup on, because what counts is my extended self, my extended identity. The artist, same thing. We had a wonderful artist this morning here, but if you just use Midjourney for your drawings, you don't practice the holistic bodily skill anymore. Same thing for going to another country through virtual worlds. And the valuation breakdown thesis is now as follows. When the organism learns less, because he or she is less exposed to the real world all the time, then the ability to perceive value qualities is reduced. So there are less and less, and this is now the cognitive mechanism, there will be less and less pre-schema that actually allow us to perceive values, to judge. And what we see, and I see it already in my students, the livid body shrinks. We are shrinking. And there are many consequences that unfortunately I don't have a lot of time, and I could spend a whole hour on those. But one consequence of that is that the value perception is reduced, the real world turns gray. When you go to the forest with your headphones on, how much do you see of the forest? Nothing. And the world turns gray. And so my last question is, or perhaps hypothesis, human flourishing can only be attained by real-world, impression-rich, social-rich, educated, attentive, spiritual, and analog nourishing of the livid body. And then you might say, oh, okay, and how do I do that in this technological world? Must we now all become hobbits? I'd love to do that, actually. But I'm working on value-based engineering, so I'm actually trying to build technology in such a way that we can kind of be hobbits in a tech world. Thank you.